This story is a work of fiction, inspired by real events. Names, dates, locations, and identifying details have been changed or dramatized to protect privacy and enhance the narrative. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental or used fictitiously. This content is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It does not aim to glorify crime, promote violence, or pass judgment on real individuals. Viewer discretion is advised. Some scenes may contain mature, disturbing, or triggering content. What you are about to watch could have happened anywhere, to anyone. It's inspired by real events. Whispers of truth, buried beneath layers of fiction. We've changed the names, the dates, the locations, but the emotions, the betrayal, the fear, those are real. This story is not meant to accuse, only to reveal, to make you question, who do you really trust? If stories like this keep you thinking, long after they end, hit subscribe, smash like, and drop your theory in the comments. Now watch closely, before the truth disappears again.
She was not a headline, not yet. She was simply a woman moving through the rhythm of another ordinary morning. In her small apartment, sunlight leaked through thin curtains and fell across the kitchen counter. She reached for the chipped mug she always favored, the one with a fading blue pattern that had survived countless washes. A kettle hissed in the background, steam curling into the air, while she scribbled a quick reminder on a yellow sticky note and pressed it to the fridge, just as she did every day. Neighbors remembered her for small things, the way she greeted the mail carrier by name, how she often left extra food by the stairwell for strays, the notes of old soul music drifting from her window on Sunday afternoons. To her friends, she was the one who remembered birthdays, who brought light into a room without trying, who made ordinary life feel like it mattered. But behind that warmth, the foundation of her marriage had begun to crack. What once sounded like harmony now ended in silence behind closed doors. Arguments simmered, growing sharper each time, leaving behind words that could not be unsaid. And then came the camera. She sat before it, not with her favorite mug in hand, not humming to music, but with her eyes set on a screen that framed her face for the world. Her voice, steady but trembling, carried a truth she could no longer keep hidden. What followed was sudden, brutal, and irreversible. The haunting question remains. How does a woman who left kindness in the hallway end up silenced forever, live, before an audience that could only watch? Her life was built on routine, but not monotony. Each morning, she laced up worn running shoes and hit the park's outer trail, rain or shine. The regulars noticed her, the woman with earbuds in, ponytail bouncing, who always nodded politely at the same stretch by the fountain. For her, it wasn't just exercise. It was escape. At work, her desk reflected her mind, crowded but creative. Post-it notes layered across her monitor, color-coded sketches pinned to the wall, half-drained mugs scattered around. Colleagues said she was the one who caught details others missed, the one who refused to leave a project half-done. Deadlines pressed on everyone, but she carried her workload with a kind of stubborn pride. Evenings told a different story. In her apartment, canvas frames leaned unfinished against the wall, tubes of paint left uncapped as if she'd been interrupted mid-thought. Journals stacked on her nightstand bore scattered entries, beginnings without endings. Friends teased her about it, calling her the collector of half-finished stories. They didn't mean it unkindly. To them, it made her human, layered, imperfect. She had dreams of bigger things, maybe a solo exhibit, maybe opening her own studio. She spoke of them with a quiet hope, though rarely with confidence. Her friends often said she lived more for others than for herself. But there were shadows. In private, she confided worries about her marriage. Little things, at first, a sudden silence during dinner, a look that lingered too long, phone calls that ended before she could answer. She brushed them off in public, laughed them away. Yet even her laughter carried an edge. Her world, so rich in color, was already fraying at the edges. And soon, those cracks would become impossible to hide. Her final day began with precision. At 8:12 a.m., security footage showed her leaving the apartment building, dark jacket zipped, thermos in hand, a backpack slung tight across her shoulders. She glanced down at her phone before stepping into the street, unaware she was leaving a last record of herself alive. At the office, she sat through morning calls, eyes darting between her screen and the clock. Colleagues later remembered her voice catching mid-sentence, her hands fidgeting with a pen until the clip snapped. By early afternoon, her phone logs showed a series of texts, first casual, then urgent. At 1:37 p.m., one message stood out. Sent to a close friend, tonight. I need to say it all. I can't keep this anymore. That evening, her digital footprint quickened. At 5:42 p.m., she opened her fitness app but never started a run. At 6:04, she received 3 consecutive calls from her wife. None were answered. Neighbors described muffled voices rising inside the apartment shortly after. One recalled a thud against the wall, another a chair dragging across the floor. By 7:15 p.m., she had opened her laptop and joined a live stream. Friends in the chat noticed her smile was strained, her tone uneven. What followed was the kind of confession no one expected to witness in real time. She spoke of betrayal, of a truth that fractured the last pieces of her marriage. Her wife appeared briefly on screen, her face a mask of disbelief that cracked into anger. The camera kept rolling. It caught the shift from words to chaos, the frame shaking, a glass shattering, her startled cry. Viewers flooded the chat in confusion before the feed cut abruptly. When officers arrived minutes later, they found the scene disrupted beyond normal struggle. Chairs overturned. A laptop on the floor, screen fractured. A glass broken near a pool of blood. Spatter traced upward along the wall, too high to suggest accident. In their report, detectives wrote a single line that stayed with them. This apartment did not whisper tragedy. It screamed deliberate violence. Speculation began the moment the live stream ended. Clips were reposted, captions distorted, theories multiplying with every share. But inside the apartment, detectives worked through possibilities the public could only imagine. The first lead pointed to a break-in. A neighbor thought they had seen a shadow near the stairwell earlier that evening. The front door bore faint scuff marks, as if forced. Yet closer inspection told a different story. The lock mechanism showed no damage, the strike plate unbent. Inside, nothing had been taken, cash sat in plain sight, electronics untouched, jewelry left in its dish. Burglary was crossed off. Then came the prowler theory. A man had been reported loitering in the neighborhood the week before, asking questions about residents. Detectives pulled security footage from nearby shops, identified him, and found his alibi solid, a delivery driver learning a new route. Another door closed. Some clung to the idea of accident. The live stream cut abruptly, maybe she had stumbled, maybe panic had blurred what viewers thought they saw. But the apartment resisted that theory. Glass shattered in a pattern inconsistent with a simple fall. Furniture lay skewed as if dragged, not tipped. And the volume of blood on the floor told its own story. Accidents don't leave signatures like that. Every theory reached the same dead end. No intruder, no stranger, no accident. All signs looped back to the one person already inside. The live stream hadn't captured mystery. It had captured proximity. And soon, the body itself would confirm what the walls of the apartment already knew. At dawn, the victim's body lay under fluorescent lights, silence broken only by the measured voice of the medical examiner dictating observations. Bruises mapped across her arms, oval-shaped, parallel, the kind made by fingers gripping hard. A fracture in the wrist confirmed violent restraint. Around her neck, faint ligature impressions, irregular but deliberate. Internally, the evidence deepened. Pinpoint hemorrhages spotted in the eyes, classic signs of asphyxiation. No alcohol. No drugs. Nothing to dull her awareness of what had been done. Cause of death, mechanical strangulation. Trace evidence added sharper edges. Beneath her fingernails, fibers were recovered, blue threads, later matched to the suspect's shirt found in the hamper. A smear of blood on the fabric carried her DNA. On the broken glass, overlapping fingerprints were revealed, the victim's, and pressed atop them, her wife's. Digital forensics delivered the final blow. The full live stream file, examined frame by frame, pinpointed the moment of violence. The victim's voice faltered, movement blurred behind her, then a crash, then silence. Audio specialists isolated a sound buried in the static, a sharp intake of breath, cut off midstream. The examiner's final note was clinical, detached, stripped of narrative. Cause, asphyxiation. Manner, homicide. Associated suspect, intimate partner. The words landed like stone. They left no room for rumor, no space for alternative theories. When detectives delivered the findings to family, grief folded into silence. Friends later said the hardest part wasn't learning she had died, but knowing the hands she trusted most had ended her life. Science had done what emotion could not. It had given her a final voice. And that voice pointed in only one direction. The arrest was swift but not dramatic. Detectives moved before dawn, escorting her down the stairwell of her building. Cameras caught her briefly, head lowered, coat pulled tight, but the stillness on her face told little of what waited inside an interrogation room. At first, she clung to denial. We argued, yes. But I never touched her. Her voice was steady, rehearsed. She claimed her wife had knocked the glass to the floor herself, that the chaos seen on the live stream was exaggerated by viewers looking for spectacle. But detectives pressed. Why did her story put the victim alive at 7:20 p.m. when the medical examiner placed her time of death closer to 7:15? Why did she say the bruises were bold when the examiner confirmed they were fresh? Why were her fingerprints layered on top of blood not her own? Each contradiction widened the gap between her words and the evidence. Her mask of calm cracked in subtle ways. She wiped her palms on her jeans. She asked for water twice in 10 minutes. When the audio enhancement of the live stream was played, that clipped breath, that final silence, she stared hard at the table, refusing to look up. Outside, the reaction fractured the community. Some defended her, claiming she had always been protective, attentive. Others admitted they had noticed flashes of temper, the way arguments seemed to follow them. Online, the footage was dissected frame by frame, every second fueling debate. But inside the precinct, debate was over. The case was set to move forward. The question that lingered wasn't if she would face trial. It was whether a jury would see intent in her silence, or doubt in her denial. By the time the trial opened, the courthouse steps had become a stage. News crews clustered with cameras, and strangers gathered as if entering a theater. The case was no longer private grief, it was public reckoning. The prosecution wasted no time. Jurors saw the autopsy photographs, bruises along the arms, a fractured wrist, hemorrhages in the eyes. The medical examiner testified in plain words, these injuries were recent. They were not accidental. They were defensive. Her voice never faltered. Next came the live stream itself. Analysts replayed the final moments frame by frame. On the big screen, jurors watched the victim's posture stiffen, the blur behind her, the crash that followed. Then the enhanced audio, that sharp, truncated breath. Several jurors shifted uncomfortably. One pressed a pen so tightly against his notebook it tore the paper. The defense countered with doubt. They argued that video compression distorted what viewers thought they saw, that the fall of the glass had been misinterpreted as violence. They suggested the victim may have collapsed suddenly, and that panic, not intent, had followed. They grilled the examiner on contamination. Could fibers under the victim's nails have come from everyday contact? Could fingerprints have been smeared in the chaos? Witnesses brought the story closer to the bone. A coworker described her nervous laughter in the weeks before, saying, she joked about running away, but it didn't sound like a joke. A neighbor recalled hearing a scream that, cut off too fast, like someone had grabbed the sound itself. Each testimony added weight, painting a picture that evidence alone could not. But the defense had its own witnesses. A former friend claimed the victim was dramatic, prone to exaggeration. They painted her as unstable, hinting that her truth on camera may have been more performance than reality. The courtroom buzzed at the suggestion, a reminder that trials are battles not only of facts but of perception. Closing arguments sharpened the divide. The prosecution's final words, "She spoke the truth, and for that she was silenced." The evidence does not whisper. It shouts. It points. And it points here. The defense's final plea, do not convict on noise. Do not convict on fear. Convict only if certainty leaves no doubt. And if doubt remains, you must let it guide you. The courtroom fell silent. The jury filed out, doors closing behind them. For the first time since the live stream, the story left the public eye. Now, in a locked room, 12 strangers would decide whether the evidence told a story of murder, or of tragic accident. The jury took 2 days. Behind closed doors, they sifted through transcripts, replayed the live stream, and studied autopsy photographs until the faces in them blurred. In the gallery, family and friends waited in silence, their eyes fixed on the door through which 12 strangers would eventually return. When the jurors filed back into the courtroom, their expressions gave nothing away. Some clutched notebooks. One stared at the floor. Another fixed her gaze straight ahead, jaw set. The defendant glanced briefly at them, then looked down, as if bracing for impact. The foreperson stood, unfolded a slip of paper, and read aloud. Guilty of murder in the 2nd degree. The words seemed to hang in the air before anyone moved. Then came the sound of grief, a mother's cry breaking the silence, a sister clutching a framed photograph to her chest, friends holding one another as tears streamed freely. For them, the verdict did not erase the loss, but it affirmed what they already knew, her truth had cost her life. The defendant sat rigid. She did not cry, did not plead. She pressed her lips together, fists tight in her lap. Once, she shifted in her chair, as if to speak, but no words came. Her silence filled the room more heavily than any denial. At sentencing weeks later, the judge's words carried finality, this was not accident. It was choice, made in anger, seen by the world. For that, you will spend the next 28 years behind bars. Outside, the community split. Some whispered that justice had been served. Others struggled to reconcile the woman they once saw smiling at neighborhood gatherings with the one now in shackles. Online, the footage replayed endlessly, dissected by strangers who never knew her name until it was too late. But the final word did not belong to the headlines or the courtroom. It belonged to her. The unfinished journal stacked by her bedside, the sketches abandoned mid-stroke, the half-written notes still clinging to her fridge, all reminders of a life cut short, but not erased. In the end, it was not just the jury's voice that was heard. It was hers.